Well, Statistics South Africa, or Stats SA, says the expanded definition of unemployment, which includes those who are discouraged or not searching for employment for different reasons, is at 42% of the country's eligible workforce, also calculated by age. Now, this number does not only constitute unskilled and uneducated people, but it also includes matriculants and graduates. South Africa's unemployment problem has been well documented long before the outbreak of the coronavirus. Some studies locate the problem to inadequate education and a lack of skills. In 2018, the Department of Higher Education and Training contracted the Human Sciences Research Council to research and establish a mechanism to support skills planning and training of students in preparation for the labour market. Well, joining us now to discuss this is Ntombizamasala Hlophe, who is a Ntombizamasala, I beg your pardon, we've spelt it wrong on the autocue. It's Ntombizamasala Hlophe, who is a Director of Strategy at Yellowwood. Good to have you. Thanks very, very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Leanne.
Absolute pleasure. So the Finance Minister mentioning youth specifically and higher education, sorting out the budget for students by the medium-term statement, as well as other things such as the 791.2 billion rand for infrastructure investment drive. Does this give you a bit of hope?
I think we always have to have a sense of hope when there's continued investment in youth. I think given the size of the population of young people in the country, we almost don't have a choice but to do that. The challenge is the perspective with which we choose to invest that money. And I think that often is where we have some of the conflicting opinions about how to go about arresting and changing the unemployment challenge in the country.
Yeah. I mean, as a young person on a board of youth development NPO, what do you think is the biggest employment challenge in South Africa?
Potentially, the real problem that we certainly see from our perspective is quite a traditional view to problem solving. We all take quite a linear view of the fact that people must go to basic education, higher education, some form of tertiary institution, and then go into a formal working environment. And what we're seeing from all of the studies about the way that the world is changing is that we actually need a rather unconventional perspective of how we go about things. The consideration not just for preparing people for the output of what an industry requires, but rather thinking about the process that it requires. What kind of thinkers are we producing? What kinds of skills? And even the dexterity with which people have with things like digital is really what we believe is missing in the conversation. We're all very obsessed with the absolute number of qualified individuals rather than thinking about what is the nature of the workforce and how adaptable is it to change.
Important question. What does South Africa's workforce actually look like currently? And what should it look like?
Right. Maybe let me start with perhaps what it should look like. What it does look like, I think I have to have respect to statisticians who spend a lot more time in there.
Yeah.
But really what it should look like is a population of people who are prepared to respond to change. A lot of the industries that we're dealing with, including mining, which remains our biggest industry, is changing at a pace so rapid that even the current qualified individuals are not necessarily prepared to execute those jobs to the benefit of a booming economy. And I think that that's really what we've got to look at is, do we have a population of people who are able to, through complex problem solving, creativity, negotiation skills, working with others, are able to actually reconfigure themselves into new forms of work. So if you are a worker and you are dealing with digitization in your workforce, your ability to necessarily touch a screen might not necessarily be what you need, because that can be taught. But your ability to be receptive to the requirements of your job changing and the expectations of you to work from, in the past year, to work from an office that's filled with people rather to alone and still remain as high in your output and as performance driven is really what we've got to focus on. We're at a precipice of change, and that's what our workforce should look like. What it currently looks like is really filled with people who are quite technically equipped, if they are fortunate enough, to execute a series of instructions. People work linear line management, one person reporting to another, and you're finding very little imagination about how to change a reality. If you look at our big organizations in this country, the big legacy businesses don't innovate. We struggle to turn our businesses inside out. versus how other countries around the world do it. Yeah. And that's really what you find is the biggest challenge that we're facing in the competitive context of what the future world of work looks like.
And Ntombizamasala, I don't want to let you go. In fact, I'm going to ask you to stay after the 8 o'clock news because I think that this is so important. However, we have our SABC2 viewers with us right now. And this, of course, is a big portion of the population that is watching, particularly the youth. And your organization has written a paper on a broader discussion on the future world of work and the type of work opportunities, especially the skills acquisition presented by the fourth industrial revolution that we could be, pushed into, which we have already. Just very quickly, if you can, tell us about these opportunities.
Sure. So part of what we found, and we were quite interested in Africa's opportunity particularly. So what we found is the biggest opportunity that Africa has is actually to respond to what we do and who we are. When you look at what everyone is calling the gig economy, right? It's this idea of being paid per task. Effectively, that's freelance. Effectively, that's every person who's standing outside a builder's warehouse asking to be a plumber, a painter, a builder. That is the nature of what our work looks like. 85% of our workforce on this continent is in the informal economy. And yet all of our conversations when we talk about employment are in the 15% of the formal economy. So really what we are is a population that is incredibly prepared to respond to the nature of what the digital world is demanding. And really much more importantly, the flexibility that our audience has and as a population that we typically have to responding to change is really what we think is quite pertinent to being able to respond to that opportunity.
All right, I'm going to pause you. We're going to pick up this interview. I'm just taking it for granted you're available. I hope you are. Just for a few more minutes after the news at 8. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. We have to say goodbye to our SABC2 viewers. That interview will continue, and I'm looking forward to hearing more.
It's such an important